So I saw a video recommended to me the other day about Sonic games ranked by difficulty, and I thought to myself, that's a great idea. I should do that with Mega Man. And so, here we are. I'm going to rank every 2D Mega Man platformer, and X7, from easiest to most difficult. I say 2D platformers because it would be hard to compare games of other genres, and because I haven't played the Legends games in like a decade now, and I've never played the Battle Network and Star Force titles. So, with that said, I'm just going to go in release order, giving every game a difficulty score from 1 to 5. 1 is the easiest, and 5 is the hardest, and then ordering them at the end. So, without further ado, let's begin. A video like this can be kind of tough to be non-biased about, since some of these games I've played like 1,000 times each, and others I've played only a couple of times, but regardless, I'll try my best to be neutral. Another thing that's tough to work with here is that, if you don't use a guide, every player's experience of a Mega Man game will be unique to them. Mega Man 1 begins this trend as you can play the stages in any order. If you happen to pick a stage like Iceman first, you'll be in trouble, because the platforming controls in this game really needed some fine-tuning. However, most people playing these games for the first time now have the ability to look up a lot of the secrets and strategies, or have access to endless save states and rewind features and such. Not that I'm factoring that in, I'm just trying to say that if you know what you're doing, the game can be easy to exploit via glitches and boss weaknesses, like the pause glitch. Some levels like Bomb Man and Guts Man can be short and easy, and others like Elec Man offer far more challenge. With this game, there's a couple of spots where the difficulty rises, but for the most part it's pretty manageable compared to other NES platformers. I mean, when I first beat this game, it was on the PS2 version with no save states or anything, so I'm gonna give the game a 3. It has tough parts and can be hard if you don't know what you're doing, but also can be easy to manage if you do, so it's right in the middle. Mega Man 2 is well known as a tough-as-nails rite of passage NES game, but I don't really see it. Like the first game, it has some parts where the difficulty really spikes. If you play Heatman's level without Item 2, the block section is the hardest in series history. If you play Quickman stage without the time stopper, it's really difficult, and there are annoying bosses here too, like the Boo Beam Trap, where you need to precisely manage your Crash Bomber ammo to defeat every target. But this game is even more broken than the first game. Almost every weapon is super strong, and the metal blades are some of the most overpowered weapons in any side-scroller. It takes 4 shots to use up 1 energy bar, and pausing the game resets the count, giving you an easy way to have infinite ammo. It shoots in every direction and goes across the whole screen and does great damage to almost everything, making it one of the easiest games in the series if you do that. It's fun to play like this, but the difficulty is not very high when you have it for most of the game. Also, I'd imagine most US players will pick normal mode at first. This was added to the US version of Mega Man 2 and made the game even easier with bosses getting killed faster. Hard mode is the Japanese default and the intended experience. To be fair, this does make some bosses a lot tougher, especially if they aren't weak to the blades, so if you consider the Japanese difficulty, I'm still willing to give the game a 3. Mega Man 3 was kind of a tough one to give a number to. The game is, for the most part, pretty easy. The game's rush development led to it being really unbalanced, but once more, in the player's favor. The level design is good, but its more challenging set pieces are effortless to cheese when using the Rush Jet or the Rush Marine. You'd have to know where to unlock them first, yes, but once you do, you can trivialize most every platforming section. The bosses are easy to clear with their weaknesses too. So the main campaign doesn't provide much trouble, even compared to the simple first 2 games. The only part of the game that raises the difficulty are the Doc Robot levels, where the instant kill obstacles are placed all over the stages. They are definitely the hardest part of the game and worthy of a 4 on their own, as in tough, but not the most tough, but the rest of the game is pretty easy, and the final levels give out lives and E-tanks like candy. Which is why I think Mega Man 3 can only get a 2. Because it's just a simple and easy game for most of the runtime, just not thoughtlessly easy. Mega Man 4 is where the NES Mega Man games got a lot more consistent. The games became far less exploitable with glitches and oversights and offered consistently challenging stage designs that ramp up throughout the campaign. Having said that, that doesn't mean it's consistently high challenge, it's just more consistent. So ultimately, it's not going to score any higher than a 3. Mega Man 4 has difficult sections like rocks falling in Drill Man stage or enemies flying out of pits in Cossack 1, but the game is still pretty simple to navigate if you've played the previous games. The charge shot and easy boss weakness kills helps with that too. I said in my review that I liked how 4 was structured, but felt like the last levels in Wily's Castle weren't a sufficient enough difficulty increase to make the 2 castle system worthwhile. So, I'm going to give Mega Man 4 a 3. Mega Man 5 has a lot of fun and creative stage designs that put your platforming and timing skills to the test, but it's once more not super ball-busting. What makes Mega Man 5 fun is how varied it is, like standing on the bubbles of Wave Man stage or destroying pillars in the Proto Man castle. It's a very standout stage roster, but I also thought it wasn't the most challenging thing in the world, and I don't think a newcomer would either. I'm gonna give it a 2. I wavered between giving it a 3 or a 2. A 3 is a game that either falls in the middle of difficult and easy for lack of balance like 1 and 2, or it just feels really balanced in its difficulty while not being that hard like 4. But 4 is certainly harder than 5, so I went with a 2. Mega Man 6 has Plant Man Stage, which ends in this perilous platforming section, but that's the only part of this game that sticks out in my mind as really challenging. Part of what I like about 6 is just how well telegraphed most of the obstacles are, like showing you these tiles mean there's a drop by dropping you into a safe area. Later on, they can use that as a deadly obstacle since you know the rules already. So theoretically, if you have a flow with Mega Man gameplay, you can get through many sections with ease. Not always, but a lot of the time. So because of everything being so well telegraphed, I thought that's why the game was worthy of a 3. It's a fair game. And I swear these scores aren't because I'm some based Mega Man player. I just think, as I've always said, that these NES Mega Man games just aren't as tough as I often hear them described. I just think they're either broken in your favor like the first 3 or balanced well like the second 3. So they mostly got 3s across the board, when there are other NES platformers that I just think are impossibly challenging. Mega Man X is where things get more complicated. As I've said a million times, I've played X1, X2, X3, and X4 maybe 1,000 times each, so I think all of these games are super easy and could probably play them in my sleep. But Mega Man X can be tough if you don't know what you're doing. However, I'm still going to give X1 a 3, because the level design can be a bit simple and linear, and the bosses almost all have Spark Mandrill syndrome where they get utterly stun-locked by their weaknesses, outright ensuring your victory before the fight even begins if you have the right weapon. It has challenging final levels and a difficult final boss in your first several playthroughs, so for that reason I think it's worthy of a 3, a game that's fair and balanced but can be easy to play through. Mega Man X2 is a step up in the difficulty for sure. This game is very fair in that attacks from enemies and bosses and obstacles are easy to read and understand, but it just asks a lot more of players than X1 did. You need to be able to use the dash and wall jump to move through challenging obstacles far more. And while it's all fair, it's just more difficult than X1. It certainly took me longer to master X2 than X1, so X2 is actually going to be the first 4 on the list. Which I think is the ideal score, a game that's hard but readable. Takes a little elbow grease to get good at. Returning to the classic series, you have Mega Man 7. I like how the difficulty is done in this game, giving you 4 easier levels before giving you the other 4 tougher stages. But I'm going to give this game a 3 as well. By the time you get to the harder levels, you're more accustomed to the game, probably have the super adapter, so you'll be in good hands by this point. The final levels are also a reasonable challenge. The final boss is a bit of a difficulty spike, but I think it's approachable if you know how to aim the spring weapon properly. Mega Man X3, despite being one of my favorite 2D games ever, therefore being a game I could play any day of the week, it's not very forgiving. What's interesting about X3 is that I think its level design and challenges are simpler than X2's. The levels can get pretty flat and you don't need as many Mega Man X specific skills to get through it. But the game compensated by upping the damage values on everything. X3 is a hard game to do out of weakness order because the bosses can destroy you in 2 hits or so with a default health bar. The patterns of the bosses are easy to avoid when you know what they are, but the limited animation makes them hard to anticipate and the high damage values will really mess with you. Plus, many secrets in X3 are pretty obtuse and feature some obnoxious sections at the end. So I've got no choice but to give this game the first 5 on the list. It's definitely the hardest game thus far. Before moving on to the PS1 era, I figured I'd mention the classic and X games on Game Boy and other handhelds. I only played the Game Boy Mega Man games once, but I honestly don't remember them that well, even though that was like a few months ago. So I rewatched my video on them so I could say the following. I feel like the controls and physics of the early ones made it more difficult than it would have been if it was on console, but then Dr. Wily's Revenge had sparse checkpoints and instant kill obstacles, so it can get a 4. 2 was super easy though. The Metal Blades broke the game, so I'm going to make it the first 1 on the list. I got through this game like it was nothing. 3 is going to get a 4, because while most of the game is pretty simple, the second set of 4 levels you unlock was a huge difficulty spike. I spent like 22 minutes on Dustman's level in this game. It just expected the most out of you of any of these games in these 4 levels, so 4. The fourth one was a lot more balanced. Its charge shot kind of trivialized enemies, but it wasn't super easy or anything, so this one can get a 3. And then the 5th one can also get a 3. There's only so much a fair and balanced Game Boy game can do. I appreciated its originality and it took me the longest to beat this one because of said originality, but it wasn't as annoying as 3 got. So that's why it got that score. And then Mega Man & Bass 2 for the Wonder Swan was really in one ear and out the other. It had some interesting parts, but the challenge wasn't one of them, so 1. The X series also had handheld games too, only Mega Man Extreme and Extreme 2. I'm gonna give the first Extreme a 1 because it's all recycled content from X1 and X2, only it feels much easier and is another game that you can glide through without much effort or hassle. Extreme 2 has more original parts, but then the upgrade system in this game decimates enemies and bosses. So that would be worthy of a 1, but it does have some challenging bosses like the Sphinx tank, so I'll go ahead and give it a 2. Now back to the consoles. Mega Man 8 is kinda like 5, where I wasn't sure if I was gonna give it a 3 or a 2. Like Mega Man 5, 8 has a lot of variety and interesting levels. I think the usage of special weapons in the stages are some of the best in the series, like how so many sections in the back half require weapon use to solve puzzles or progress. There's a lot I admire about 8, but when doing the regular platforming, it is on the easy side. The only difficulty increase in this game are the snowboard sections in the final boss, since Mega Man 8 does not have E-tanks in it. So the stakes are upped when doing the boss rush and the final boss in one go. But 3 sections doesn't really change the fact that most of the game is simple, albeit quite fun to play, so I think I'm going to stick with my rating of a 2. Part of why I gave it a 2 was that I was considering giving that score to Mega Man X4, but this game is definitely harder than Mega Man 8. Like X2, X4 requires fast thinking in sections like Magma Dragoon stage where magma rocks are falling over a bottomless pit or needing to dash and wall jump with precise timing to get the best rankings in Cyber Peacock stage. It's definitely not the hardest the X series gets. X2 was harder, especially with the boss fights, as X4s are easier to do without weakness weapons and even easier with them, and its final stages are nothing compared to the second game, in that they're pretty short and not that numerous. Zero's campaign in X4 is slightly harder, so I was willing to give the game a 3 overall. Mega Man and Bass is one I had to put some thought into. I never found this game to be super frustrating compared to other Mega Man games like a lot of fans. Not as a brag, I just never did. Perhaps because I played it on SNES, the original version, and not the cropped Game Boy Advance port, but even still, when considering a score, I felt like it would be wrong to give it anything other than a 5. The game was created with the express intention of being the hardest Mega Man game yet. It doesn't have E-tanks, it has difficult, demanding platforming sections, and some parts are hard to see coming and enemies are everywhere, especially when playing as Mega Man. The final levels are also some of the most brutal in series history, the second of them having 4 bosses in one stage. Bass makes the game slightly easier with his dash and double jump, but his bosses are also much more difficult. With Mega Man, you can experiment with the boss order somewhat, but with Bass, his shots are too weak to make anything other than the weakness order worthwhile. It's a very tough game, so it was a 5. Mega Man X5 was another one I had a hard time thinking up. For the most part, I think X5 is approachable, but it just has these parts where it's not, like the ride bike section of Squid Adler stage, or the part where the boss rush gives each boss a whole screen's worth of health. If you don't have the ultimate armor, this part can be a nightmare. So can the Quickman homage in Zero Virus 1, or the Yellow Devil boss at the end of that stage. A lot of X5 is waiting around in elevators and auto-scrollers, so that can be trying on your patience. I was leaning between 3 and 4, but I'm going to give it a 4. It's not the hardest Mega Man game you'll play, but there will be parts where it definitely goes up. Mega Man X6 should need no introduction. This is one of the worst Mega Man games ever made. It was rushed out the door after X5 and reeks of being unfinished. On a first playthrough, X6 is relentless. Nearly every stage has some element that makes it unapproachable. Like, let's have repetitive and hard-to-hit mini-bosses make up the entirety of Blaze Heatnix's stage, or unpredictable lasers to aim in Shield Sheldon, or the lights going out in Rainy Turtloid's level, or the RNG madness of Ground Scaravich, or hey, wouldn't it be fun if Metal Shark Player's stage was a 10-minute slog of waiting for crushing blocks to go up and down. The Fortress levels are also unrelenting too, with required items and parts to beat and frustrating bosses. X6 is a dumpster fire on your first playthrough. When you know what you're doing, you can break it in your favor, but the first time is unforgettable for all the wrong reasons. Easiest choice on the list. 5. Mega Man Zero is another one that didn't take long to think up. 5. The Zero series as a whole was meant to be really challenging for Mega Man veterans, focusing on a refined form of Zero's gameplay with more combat depth than any Mega Man game ever had before. The first Mega Man Zero is not nearly as fleshed out or well thought out as its sequels, though. So through the game's purpose of being hard and the parts that aren't great like its limited life system and grinding for resources and abilities, it's a really tough game. Sometimes when I'm in the mood for a Zero series replay, I just start with Zero 2, because while I do think Mega Man Zero is a good game, I just don't think it's fun enough to revisit often because of its shortcomings and challenges. But unlike X6, it doesn't make me think ill of the experience. I enjoy it at its best, it's just a tough game. Mega Man Zero 2 is such an improved sequel. It streamlined everything that didn't work out about the first game, such as giving you your weapons early, lowering requirements to unlock new moves, and Cyber Elves, and including sub-tanks you can get without Cyber Elves. It presented the story much better, it has a banger soundtrack, much more interesting levels and bosses, and it's just a really fun game. It's not perfect, the game can be really hard at the beginning and kinda wanes as the campaign goes on, but it's a very fun ride. I was between a 4 and a 5, but I think Zero 2 can still get a 5. It has those really difficult moments that stand out in your mind long after being done with the game, but it's also really satisfying to get good at too, so it's a good 5. Going from that, we can talk about the other Mega Man game that came out the same day as Zero Two, Mega Man X7. As I'm sure every Mega Man fan expected, this game is an easy one. From the very beginning, X7 never asks much from players. You can run forward and shoot with the generous lock-on auto-aim, so in combat, the game virtually plays itself. The platforming is equally mind-numbing for an overwhelming majority of the campaign, only slightly trying to do more with the very final level. X7 is a dumpster fire of a game, just like X6. It is the worst mainline Mega Man game ever made. No, Mega Man DOS does not count. It's borderline bootleg trash not made by Capcom. If it did count, I'd give them an infinity, since I couldn't beat a single stage of either one. Anyway, yeah, X7 sucks and is one of the worst games I've ever played in my life. It is also exceptionally easy, while still paradoxically being a frustrating game at times, like during the Flame Hyanard boss fight where the developers subjected all the players to unrelenting auditory torture. So again, this game gets a 1, though the case could be made for the game getting a 5, since so many players who have played it could not bring themselves to finish it. But that's not because it's hard, it's because it sucks. Mega Man Zero 3 is one of the finest games in the whole franchise, though. It's such a satisfying combination of action, high-speed platforming with skill-based combat. It just provides a lot of depth to players from start to finish. It also got rid of the things 1 and 2 had that were unnecessary, like grinding to have your full weapon moveset. For that reason, I decided to give Zero 3 a 4 on the scale. It's plenty challenging, but the game just isn't as tough as the first two for reasons that make 3 more fun to play. And the finale is a bit easy if you've maxed out your gear. But that doesn't take away from what is one of the most in-depth and fun Mega Man 2D platformers, a game that has a ton of content and replayability, more than your average Mega Man game for sure. Mega Man Zero 4 tried to do things a little differently. It has the standard 8 bosses mission select from the Classic and X series, and it also gives you some direct control over the difficulty. In each level, you can change the weather that either makes the stage easy or hard for you, like a level will be normal or will have rain and wind in the stage that was already about jumping from platform to platform. The reward for playing the harder level is getting an extra move in combat, which is pretty cool and incentivizes being good at overcoming the game at its most difficult. And the endgame still offers a challenge, more so than Zero 3, but the control you have over the difficulty made me give it a 4. I knew Mega Man X8 was going to be towards the top of the list, but I wasn't sure where. I ultimately decided to give X8 a 5. The game is largely a collection of arcadey challenges in each stage, like running away from a robot or shooting down a target, but it can be really difficult to deal with it all. Especially because X8 caps your lives at 5, when X5 through X7 had virtually unlimited lives since getting a game over just sent you to the checkpoint. X8 is not a complicated game on paper, you just get through the 8 levels no different than any other X game, but it just feels so much harder to do since the levels are so gimmicky and the lives are so limited. The punishment for losing them is going back to the menu, so it doesn't leave a lot of room for error, so I gave it a 5. Mega Man Maverick Hunter X remade the first Mega Man X for PlayStation Portable. It's very comparable to the original X, but I would say it's the easier game. Like this mini-boss in Sting Chameleon stage. It wasn't super challenging in the original X, but then it can be beaten in one hit in the remake. The final phase of Sigma in X1 was immune to the instant kill Hadouken move, but can be one-shotted with it in Maverick Hunter X. So I'm gonna give the remake a 2. It's like X1, but easier. The Vile mode is harder, but also not that fun in my opinion, so I didn't really factor it in. Mega Man Powered Up remade the original Mega Man for the PlayStation Portable. This remake did a lot more to change the game than Maverick Hunter X, since it redesigned every stage and also had 2 bosses added to the roster, to bring it up to the usual 8 since Mega Man 1 only had 6 bosses. I only played this game once, but I found it pretty easy to pick up and play. It was like Mega Man 5 in that I liked the experience and the creative level roster, but it never makes you break that much of a sweat besides the boss rush, so I'm gonna give it a 2. Mega Man ZX is one of the games I had in mind at the beginning when I talked about games I have less exposure to. Like I said, I've played X1 like 1,000 times in the last decade, and played other games like Mega Man 1 like maybe 10 or 20 times in my life. But then ZX is a game I've played like 4 times in 10 years. Definitely not more than 5 times. The last time I played the ZX saga was when the Zero ZX Legacy Collection came out back in 2020, so I'm going off of memory here. But I'm gonna give ZX1 a 4. It gets that score because I don't feel like the game itself is that hard. Like, the levels are a decent challenge for sure, but the stages are pretty manageable, and I remember the bosses being doable without much memorization as well. But the game's progression is what gets it such a high rating. Getting a game over just sends you so far back that it makes dying really stressful. The game was trying to be a fusion of Mega Man and Metroidvania elements, and so the lives and game overs in a big open space is just really dampening on the game in my eyes. The game is way more fun with the new checkpoints added in the Legacy Collection. And the map is confusing too. That isn't directly tied to difficulty, but I figured I'd mention that, since it adds to the issues I had while playing on DS. So, 4. Mega Man ZX Advent was definitely an improvement, as the checkpoints weren't nearly as bad as ZX1 and the map was much easier to read. ZXA is just an easier game to get through on your first time than ZX, even playing on DS. but definitely so with the new checkpoints from the collection, so I'll give it a 3. But we're almost home free, we just have 3 more games. Mega Man 9 was the triumphant return of classic Mega Man, and it certainly wasn't taking prisoners. It's one of the hardest Mega Man games ever, throwing everything in the kitchen sink at players. Honestly, so much so that I think the game doesn't really feel like an NES Mega Man game since those all scored much lower, but this game is easily getting a 5. It relishes in giving you a challenge, but an observant player will be able to overcome it with patience and practice. But it's also well designed enough to where you can see things coming if you're really observant, so it is fair, just really tough and unforgiving. So it can be really fun to get a flow state in, it's just very hard. So like I said, I'm giving it a 5. Mega Man 10 was more of the same, but didn't really have that same fire in its level design. It had creative stage designs and good platforming, but wasn't as tough as Mega Man 9, and even came with an easy mode if it was still too much for you. It just felt like standard Mega Man fare, so I decided to give it a 4. The stages aren't much to write home about, but the bosses can still be pretty tough. Don't get me wrong, some of which are very easy to destroy with weaknesses, but others like Commando Man and Blade Man offer more challenge, so I was willing to give Mega Man 10 a 4, but it could have gotten a 3. What does get a 3 is the final game, Mega Man 11. This game has tough moments, mostly due to knockback from enemies sending you into the abyss, but with the newly added double gear system, most of the challenges in Mega Man 11, while smartly laid out, will not be leaving you dying and restarting a lot like previous Mega Man games may have. Wily Fortress 1 and my first ever playthrough of Blockman stage really stumped me though, but for the rest of it, it's a perfectly in the middle Mega Man game when it comes to the difficulty, so I gave it a 3. But with that said, that's every game, and now it's time to rank them in order. As we see here, there are a lot of 3s, which was interesting. Mega Man has a reputation for being a tough-as-nails platformer, but as I've always said about the NES games, and now the whole series, I think more Mega Man games are easier to approach than it may seem, especially with the convenience features added in the newer collections. So if you haven't played a lot of Mega Man before, maybe this list gives you hope that it's not that tough to play a lot of the good ones. And if you have, I hope this list gave you something to think about and compare and contrast with if you have your own list in mind. But that's about all the time we have for today, so I hope you enjoyed the video, because if you did, I may make more videos like it. But to close, I'll say what I always do. If you made it this far into the video, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.